Greetings and happy Thanksgiving. It's that time of the year, isn't it? You know, Thanksgiving is a time about giving thanks to God. I love Thanksgiving time. It's a good time to remember and reflect. I hope you take time for that this holiday season. So Sally and I are so grateful for you and your love and your support at Harvest Church. I have a little Thanksgiving special for you. We're going to roll out here in a moment, tied to grace stories and seeing God's fingerprints on our lives. And I know if you stop for a moment and thought about it, you can remember a story, a time in your life when God was just there for you and He worked a miracle, or He saw you through it, or something positively, unexpectedly happen. I love those moments in my life. Here's what I want to encourage you to do. I want to encourage you to take some time for reflection through this Thanksgiving season right here. Write it down, remember it, and pause for a moment and thank God for it. Mine would go back to being about a 15-year-old kid. I nearly drowned, and I know I didn't drown because God was with me. Some of you heard me share that story about fishing, getting tired and hot, and going swimming, and it was not a good choice. I almost drowned in a creek. God saved me. I'm going to mark that this Thanksgiving as one of my stories where I can thank God for. We have an awesome story coming up right now. I want you to listen, and surely you'll be able to give thanks with these folks as they share their story with you. Happy Thanksgiving. God bless you. See you soon.
A Chapin woman fears she may be down to her last chance at life. She's been on a 6-year journey of fighting cancer.
We didn't think that her liver reserve was enough to continue those types of treatments, such as radiation or radiofrequency ablation or anything like that.
She needed a more radical approach, but Scarlett was running out of time.
My name is Scarlett Lutz Casperbauer.
Hey, I'm Chasten Cannon.
My name is Kristen Cannon, and Chasten is my husband.
My name is Jordan Lutz, and I'm Scarlett Lutz's little brother, and I work at the fire department with Chaz.
In 2014, when I was 29, I was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. I think when you're 29, it's not really something you expect to hear. I had a little boy. I was a single mom. I knew that the Lord was able to heal me if that was going to be the plan, but I also had to be okay with that not being the plan. And I didn't want my son to ever grow up and be bitter about whatever God's plan for our lives was going to be. And so my prayer from the moment that I was diagnosed was, Lord, you don't have to heal me, but just give me a way to fight this until he is at least old enough to take care of himself, because he was only 6. So I'd been having symptoms for a while, and I didn't say anything. And it finally just got to a point where it was there, I had to say something.
They told Scarlett, they're like, hey, and they called us, and they're like, she's got terminal cancer, which of course, is very detrimental. We have there's 7 of us in the family, so it's a lot of kids, and we're all very close. So it was very, very tough news to take in. And they give her a projected timeline. They're like, she'll probably live this many years to this many years, and you're like, well, Scarlett, if anybody knows Scarlett, she's got a positive attitude, great outlook on life, and I'm always praying for a miracle, and and I think a lot, as far as your self-being has a lot to do with your faith in God and how you feel about life in itself, and Scarlett's got a great outlook on life, and so I was always praying for a miracle, but I always had the expectation of you can't put a timeline on somebody, only God can do that.
Of course, whenever you hear you have cancer, I think the first question that comes to everyone's mind is, how long do I have? Typically, it's 12 months to 2 years. Mine was stage 4 due to the fact that it was in my lymph nodes. It had perforated the colon wall, and it was in the lymph nodes, and it had gone to my liver. And the plan was to remove the primary tumor and remove the spots they saw in my liver. However, whenever they went in to do the surgery, there was too many cancerous spots. They couldn't do any type of surgery on my liver. It was too vast, too much. That began our journey. We did chemotherapy, we did radiation, we did more chemotherapy, we did more radiation, we did something called a microwave ablation. By the time we got to 2019, I had done several different types of what they call cocktails, which is different combinations of chemotherapy that they put together to try to combat whatever cancer is growing. And in 2014, they had put me on one type of drug, and by the time we got to 2019, we had been on possibly 4, maybe 5 different types of cocktails. And in 2019, it all stopped working. And the cancer had started to grow again. And we knew we were out of options. So my husband is, he's amazing. He was my boyfriend when I was diagnosed, and the crazy nut wanted to marry me. And I'm like, do you know what you're signing up for? Because I've pretty much been given, here's your 2 years walking papers. And so we got married in 2015. He said, we're going to go to New York to Sloan Kettering, and we are praying for a Hail Mary. We are praying for a miracle. We are praying that someone there would be able to possibly do this really intricate deep dive lobectomy, remove almost all your liver because everything's covered. When we got there, that wasn't the case. We met with the oncologist first, and he didn't really have anything encouraging or positive to say. Everything that they would have done, we'd already attempted. I said, I'm done. Just take me back to South Carolina. This is the Lord's plan, and I'm okay with that. My son, he's older now. It'll be okay. I'm okay with it. When you're diagnosed, you kind of have to make peace with, we are put on this earth to serve God. And if I lived, I was going to win. But if I died, I knew I was going to win, because that's the ultimate goal, is to be with God, to be with Christ. And I had that kind of peace, and I knew it was going to be all right. And he's like, nope, we're going to go meet with the surgeon. Let's just, one last time. I told the surgeon my story, and he said, I can't help you, but I think you might be a good candidate for something that they're trying in the USA. What is it? Tell me. And he gave me a slip of paper, and it had the names of 3 different hospitals that had just started something called a living donor liver transplant. He said, I can't tell you what it entails. I can't tell you what it's all about. I don't know. But you can call these places, and they may be able to help you. I called them, and one, I didn't hear back from them. The second one, I left a message, and the third one was disconnected. The surgeon said, I don't know what to tell you, but maybe try all of the chemotherapy that she's been on. That each one of those cocktails, let's try it all at one time. It took it was wham. It was terrible. In, I think May, it's approximately April-May timeframe, we realized this is not slowing things down. In order for me to possibly be a candidate for anything, we had to stop the cancer. One of the hospitals that was on the list was Strong Memorial Hospital, which is in Rochester, New York. And when I finally got the doctor who was in charge of this brand new program that they don't have a protocol for, and I think only 2 or 3 had been done in the USA with the type of parameters that we needed, I introduced myself. I'm like, my name is Scarlett. He said, I know who you are. I'm like, no, there's no way. I'm this small town girl from South Carolina, and I'm just a little mama trying to live. There's no way you know who I am. He said, yeah, I know who you are. He said, I just got back from Utah, and the doctor that you met with in New York at Sloan Kettering told me your story. I got off the phone with him, and I looked at my husband. I said, he's the one. That is the one who is going to help me. We sent everything to him, And he gave us a list of parameters that we needed to fall into in order to be approved. And he said, you meet all of these parameters except for one. We don't have your cancer under control. And you have to prove to us that we can keep it maintained before we can move forward. Okay, how long? 3 months, 6 months. Okay, whatever it takes. I'm like, all right, Lord, if you want us to overcome it, you're gonna have to help us. And so that was approximately May of 2019. June, we finally got the go-ahead. We can start looking for a donor, but you have to stay on the treatment. July, I put out a plea. I got on social media, said, okay, I'll put it all out there. Here's my blood type, here's what I need, but I can't know about any of it. If you want to help me, here's the phone number. Call Strong Memorial in Rochester, New York. And you know, I think within the first hour, it had been shared. I want to say we added it up and it was with over 25 or 30,000 different groups, pages. I mean, it was just like, I was just reading the post and I was just, my heart was so, it just leapt for joy because you don't realize how kind people are until you really need help.
Scarlett posted on social media her plea for a living donor, and I just clicked share and reshared that, and within a little bit of time I got a text message from Brooks, my brother-in-law, asking me, you know, I'm this blood type, what all does this entail? And I was like, I don't know, let me Google it. So I Googled it and I sent him a text back and I was like, Brooks, dude, this is intense. This is at least an 8-hour surgery. This is 3 months out of work. This is a week in the hospital. You have to do everything in New York. Like, I don't think this is for you. So that was kind of the end of that conversation. And the next day my husband came home from the fire department and he said, what's my blood type? And I was like, oh no.
I found out Scarlett needed a transplant on Facebook, actually, from a post that she had shared. I was like, oh, okay, well, let me see if I can find out what my blood type is.
But Jazz, they do not want your liver. He had kind of lived a rough life prior to recommitting his life, and I knew from fire department physicals that he always had elevated liver enzymes. He had, a year prior to that, been someone who drank alcohol. So I was like, they don't want your liver.
For most of my older two kids, their life, while I was at the fire department, I was a very selfish person. I made sure the kids were in church, I was in church, but that was about the extent of it. I was probably the worst example for my kids, just in how I was living. There's no way that they could have looked at me and been like, oh, I see God, or I see Jesus. The kids and Kristen, you know, they took the brunt of a lot. I was in the gym, so I was taking things you weren't supposed to take. I was selling things you're not supposed to sell. You know, I had my own addictions. I was either sitting in our house or I was sitting in my truck. I can't remember, but it was in September 4 years ago. And I just remember thinking, you know, Lord, if you're real, I can't do this. I need you to change me. And if you change me, you know, I'll give you everything. And that was the first time I had truly given him everything. In the past, I had given him most of this, you know, gray areas. I was like, So, I mean, I gave him the good, the bad, and the ugly. He fixed me. And when I say fixed, you know, he didn't make me perfect. Like, I screw up every day. You can ask my whole family. Like, I apologize probably more than anybody I know because I screw up that much. You know, I'm not good at too many things, but I feel like, you know, I've got able hands. If somebody needs some help, I can do whatever I can do to help them. At the time I was at the fire department, I had gone to a couple different stations and had some issues at the one I was at before I got to Valentine. I got there and the captain that we had at that point and Jordan and the other driver that we had. They were a good group of guys, and I know that the Lord put me there for a reason. I went through a bunch of other stuff at other places, but that was, I can see now, was the destination He was guiding me to go to. So I get there, and I'm still living life, for me. And it was just a good group of guys, but slowly the captain we had, Shotzi, he was working on me, changing me at the fire department to make me a better employee. And I know this is the Lord, just working all this together. But Jordan was there, and he was just a senior firefighter. So seniors are not engineers. So if there was somewhere else in the department that didn't have a driver, they'd send him there. I would be on the back of the truck. And then whenever he didn't have anywhere to drive, he'd be there and I'd float somewhere else.
We've probably been in the same station probably 8 or 9 years now. So we've got 24 hours of, in the same building, running emergency calls together and being there together. So we've become pretty good friends over the years.
Of course, a lot of people said we've put our name in. What do we need to do? I said, it's more than just blood type. They look at BMI, they look at your lifestyle, they look at how old you are, they look at your height. I mean, so many different things I didn't even know about that they're looking for. The way the process works for a living donor liver transplant, they take each candidate and they evaluate the candidate. They go through all of the paperwork, they go through all the testing, and either the candidate is approved to move forward or they say no and they move on to the next one. They go down the list. In August, we knew we were running out of time. Some of the numbers that I was required to keep under a certain level had started to climb. And we were really close to not meeting the parameters any longer. And my husband called the doctor who is in charge of the transplant team, and he said, she's out of time. You have to make a decision. You have to do it now, or her life will be on your hands. He said, okay, we're gonna pick someone off of paper. We're gonna look for the best person just based on the information that they sent, and we're gonna go from there.
There was a number you were supposed to call in New York. So I called, and that was just to make an appointment so they could call you and tell you what all it was entailed. And if you still wanted to do it, they'd send you the paperwork. So it was 2 weeks after, I talked to Kristen about it. They sent me the paperwork. From what I understand, a lot of people were filling out the paper and sending it in. It wasn't until they called me back to schedule, I guess, a testing time to come up there. We actually have to plan when we can go up there for 2 days of testing. And the whole time, Jordan's telling me, he says, "You're the one. Like you're the one God's going to use." I was like, "How do you know this?" I'm like, it was so crazy because his mom and his younger sister were at the station and they were outside. And while they're outside, Rochester calls me and says, "Hey, can you come in 2 weeks prior to when we actually scheduled you?"
I think they called him and they talked to him and gave us the scary details of what this actually entailed. And it was way more than my Google search. So I was just like, I don't know. I don't think we could do this. Is this, gonna bankrupt us? The surgery is generally paid for by the recipient's health insurance. But what is not paid for is all of the travel, all of the, you have to stay in Rochester for a month. That's not covered. We found out because of his work requirements that he would actually miss 6 months of work. So we didn't know how all of that was going to play out. But he just said, "I feel called." And if you know Chaz, he has the gift of blessed assurance. And when he knows, he knows.
I knew that if he was going to use me, there was nothing I needed to worry about. There was nothing financially. There was nothing with my body. There was nothing, with any of it that anybody could touch because he was in control of it.
They don't tell you who they're looking at. They don't tell you what the person's name is. I didn't even know if it was male or female. I didn't know if it was a family member. We have a potential candidate. They're coming here for testing. And as far as I knew, that was the only person that had gone to New York for testing. I had made an appointment to go and have labs and some testing done in New York. And we were in our hotel and we were sitting at breakfast and somebody came and tapped me on the shoulder. Like, hey, fancy meeting you here. And I turned around and it was Chaz and Kristen. And I just knew, I mean, you don't go to Rochester, New York, just, you know, because it's a good time in September. And so, you know, it was just an incredible, I was honored. I knew that God was working throughout all of this. I didn't understand how. I don't even think I really realized to what detail.
When we found out that Chaz was a match and that he was willing to donate, which is, you know, being a match is a great thing, but being willing to sacrifice yourself to that kind of extensive recovery and operation is a very big deal. Of course, we wanted Scarlett to have the transplant, but at the same time, you know, there's always the concern of everybody's health involved. So that was a exciting and fearful time.
I mean, it just began, I want to say, a beautiful love story, because now I have my liver-in-laws. And, you know, Chaz and Kristen and their family, they gave the ultimate sacrifice for me to watch my son grow up. When I talked to the doctor who was over the transplant team, I said, I just would like a few more years. And he looked at me, he said, I think I might be able to give you a little bit more than that.
I had to give up all control. I had to rely on God and faith that everything was going to be taken care of. And it was. And it was so scary because there are strict rules on fundraising. We didn't qualify for some assistance that could be because of some red tape. The first thing was Donate Life. South Carolina came in and was a friend of a friend of a friend. It gave me your contact information and she said, I'll pay for your plane tickets. Some people from church came in and said, let us do some fundraisers. And we had people out the door for 3 hours at this fundraiser. And then we were given permission to GoFundMe, and that went through, and just generous people said, you know what, I'll match everything that comes in this weekend. And we had enough funds to pay for me to travel up there and have to be able to come back home, and for him to stay up there, and all of the things. And then of course, like, doesn't pay for your time missed from work. And that's another miraculous thing that God came through with. The fire department and said, you know what, we'll let anybody willing work for Chaz, work his shifts.
So the chief himself telling me, hey, this has never been done, but we're going to let guys sign up on these other 2 shifts and work for you, but you'll keep, you know, getting your hours. And then guys on my shift, when they'd have a holiday or vacation day come up, 24 hours off is a big deal. And for guys to just give that up for somebody else, like, I mean, he took care of that. Like, seeing God move all this stuff, and I didn't even know what was going on Scarlett's side.
He got through almost half of his time donated.
When we went up there for 2 days of testing, there was doctors, there was dietitians, there were psychiatrists, there was, I mean, you name it. Like, it was meeting after meeting after meeting, and every meeting they're sitting there telling me, okay, this is what's going to happen, this is what's going to go on, and then they stop, and then they just like, and so I'm looking at them, and then I look at Kristen, and she's looking at me, and then I look back, and I was like, am I missing something? And you know, she's like, they just want you to know what is. I was like, I know. If I had any concerns, I would not be here. That whole thing, just feeling God there the entire time, was just amazing.
Everything that has happened, God has had a hand in it, and it's crazy how You can see it. Like, if you don't believe in miracles, that I'm sitting here, I am a miracle. I shouldn't be here. When they picked Chaz off paper, they didn't know that he had quit drinking a year before, just because he felt led to. He had cleaned up his diet, he lost weight, like all of these things that they're looking for in a candidate, Chaz is just ticking them off. Yep. 30% of the world's population has an extra vein in their liver. They can do the transplant if you don't have the extra vein, or if you do have the extra vein and the donor does not, they can do the transplant. However, it involves a lot of extra stuff to make it all work, and there's also a bigger chance of a bile leak. And I have it. And the guys on the table, Chaz has it. The anatomy was perfect. Chaz had an extra large liver, nothing wrong with it. He just had a little extra. God said, here, you're gonna give this away one day. Let me give you some extra.
And then for everything financially to fall into place, I just really realized, like, this is meant to be. This was designed. You know, this is what Chaz would say, God's fingerprints. From
Getting moved to the station I was at, meeting and becoming family with the guys that were there, being saved, and then from being saved, not drinking, not taking things I was taking, and then that, I guess, 9 months prior, doing the intermittent fasting, and I dropped the weight.
And it was just, you know, to see God's hand throughout all of this. It's like, Lord, when you show up, you really show out, don't you? Every single day since then, I wake up and not a day goes by that I don't look in the mirror and feel surreal. I'm living someone else's life. I know without God's direction and His plan, we wouldn't be here. And without Chaz and Kristen and their beautiful family saying, we're willing to take this chance, because nothing's sure. You know, we're not promised tomorrow. And if they wouldn't have been willing to follow God's direction, I wouldn't be here.
Through Chaz's testimony and where God brought him from to where he was at this point in his life, that in itself was God's hand. And then for him to make a self-sacrifice, you know, you're like, wow, this is God. If you don't believe in God, I mean, just this one story, you know, it just has God written all over it.
So this has impacted our family. It's shown our kids to be givers. They see a different person. They see someone whose first resource is the Bible, is God, is someone that is gonna think of others before himself. I mean, he's a firefighter, so he does that by job, but he does it by choice too. He's all the time thinking of others and what can he do for someone? What does God want him to do for someone? And I think he's a really good example to our family, to our children for that.
I'm thankful that the Lord gave our family this opportunity, you know, for me in my faith, and Kristen and her faith, for the kids to, you know, to see God work like firsthand. People who, you know, hopefully see the story and be like, hey, I was like, you know, that guy. Like, if Jesus can turn him around, maybe he can turn me around. I don't know why you chose me, but, you know, I'm thankful that he did. And, you know, I can't thank him enough, you know, for that opportunity.
As all of this has transpired, and you can see every single touch, everything that has happened, God was directing it. No matter what happens or where I go, I want people to know that God orchestrated all of this. Not me, not my husband, not Kristen, not Chaz. God put all this together. And if that can help one person, just one, it's all been worthwhile.